When you picture the future of green energy, this probably isn't the first image that comes to mind. But St Fergus gas terminal near Peterhead has been picked to play a key role in a project aimed at helping meet climate targets.
Yeah, is that when you say fleet, is that the modules?
No, that's different.
The Prime Minister flew in here today to announce he's pouring millions into Scotland's first carbon capture project aimed at offsetting emissions. The announcement came at the same time as he confirmed 100 new drilling licences for North Sea oil and gas. So how does he square the two?
I think it's really important for everyone to recognise that even in 2050, when we are at net zero, it is forecast that around a quarter of our energy needs will still come from oil and gas. That's why technologies like carbon capture and storage are important. But what is important then is that we get that oil and gas in the best possible way, and that means getting it from here at home.
Miles off the coastline, deep under the sea, depleted oil and gas fields are considered ideal locations to lock away carbon. Existing pipelines here can be repurposed.
And an international carbon dioxide storage hub in the central North Sea.
The Acorn project will be a joint venture between Shell UK and other companies. Carbon dioxide from heavy industry will be captured, processed and injected down through wells below the seabed.
The carbon dioxide would enter the sandstone reservoir in the well, filling tiny pore spaces between the grains of sand in the rock and slowly moving out into formation.
Peterhead Port will play a key role in scaling up the project, shipping in emissions from other parts of the UK and Europe to be stored under the sea. The seeds for the Acorn project, or Scottish cluster, were first sown here years ago, but in the first round of funding, Scotland missed out, with money for carbon capture schemes going to 2 sites in the north of England instead. The Conservatives were forced to deny they were focused more on red wall voters rather than helping a workforce here in the northeast transition away from oil and gas. For many in this area, it's been a frustrating wait.
At last, the good news that we've been waiting for a long time.
Simon Brebner is the chief executive of Peterhead Port. He's looking to the future and thinks the scheme could be up and running by the end of the decade. The Prime Minister is promising 21,000 jobs as a result of this. I mean, is that realistic?
So it's not 21,000 immediately, absolutely not, but there is a desire and a requirement to get to that point at some stage.
But some campaigners fear carbon capture schemes will simply be used to justify more drilling. Last week, Greta Thunberg added her voice to protests in London about the potential reopening of the Rosebank oil field near Shetland. A decision on that's expected soon.
Today, what we've seen from the Prime Minister is basically doubling down on government climate denial by encouraging the arsonists to go and put more fuel on the fire. The last thing that we should be doing is handing out new oil and gas licences. And this push for carbon capture and storage is really little more than a greenwashing tactic.
They have the opportunity to be a world leader.
With a general election on the horizon, the climate has become a dividing line in politics. The Prime Minister says he's taking an approach that's all about boosting energy security. His opponents argue it's more about shoring up Conservative votes.
Well, a major contrast now between the two main parties. Labour would issue no new oil and gas licences. Today, Rishi Sunak is promising hundreds, claiming it will make the country less reliant on overseas imports. So let's take a closer look now at that major announcement on North Sea oil and gas production with our data correspondent, Kieran Jenkins. Kieran.
Yes, Jackie, big and obvious political divides now on this. So do we need more North Sea oil and gas extraction to power the energy we use in the UK? Well, first of all, we often talk about oil and gas together, but there are big differences in how they're produced, what we do with it all, and where it all goes. So let's look at what happens, first of all, to all that oil being pumped out of the North Sea. How much of it stays here in the UK? Well, about 20% of North Sea oil is for domestic UK consumption. Most of it, 80%, is exported worldwide into the international market. And that's why the government's critics say we're already extracting more oil than we need and selling it overseas, and they argue that's no good for the planet. Now, let's turn to gas. Most homes in the UK are heated with gas. And Rishi Sunak says rather than importing it from hostile states and playing into Vladimir Putin's hands, he wants more gas to come from Britain and claims this will bring down bills. Now, the UK is a net importer of gas, but even before the invasion of Ukraine, Russia provided just 4% of our gas in the UK. Most of our gas imports come from not very hostile Norway. So, household energy bills soared not because of Russian imports, but because the price we pay for gas is set by traders on the global market. And that price increased after Russia invaded Ukraine. So, would extracting more gas from the North Sea deliver Rishi Sunak's promise today of British energy from Britain at a cheaper cost? Well, he can't force companies that extract North Sea gas to sell it in the UK, nor at a discounted price. And many North Sea projects are backed by multinational companies from countries including Norway, the United Arab Emirates, and China. And the gas they extract is traded internationally at international prices. And right now, there's nothing stopping them exporting this gas overseas from the UK. So while Rishi Sunak argues that extracting more oil and gas will increase homegrown supplies and bring down prices, that's clearly in dispute. And we asked the government to clarify or provide the data to back up these claims. They did not. Instead, they referred us to the Prime Minister's comments today in Aberdeen, which of course repeat those very claims. Krishnan.
Thank you. Well, joining me now is the Conservative MP for South Thanet and chair of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, Craig McKinley. And just for clarity about what that means as to where you're coming from on this, you said today that you don't believe there's any climate catastrophe and that you are not convinced about the government's policies to get to net zero by 2050. So let's just start with what Rishi Sunak is claiming today. It's not true, is it, that drilling in the North Sea is going to bring down energy bills for British homes?
Well, if you add any type of supply into any type of economic cycle, you will get lower prices. I mean, it has to stand to reason. We imported from Norway just last year £40 billion worth of gas. There were additional tens of billions of pounds of imports from other parts of the world. Now, if this is all about CO2, which I hope that we are going to discuss,
let's just keep it to prices. Let's just keep it to prices. Let's just keep it to prices, because the government's claim today is this is somehow going to make us more secure and lower our energy bills. It's not going to lower our energy bills. And as for security, we were barely buying any gas from hostile states anyway. So we're just being given a con today, aren't we?
I'm sorry, Tristan, you got this completely wrong. When we had the Ukraine crisis, yes, it was true. We were not importing that much oil and gas from Russia. But given that supply then became sort of cut off because of sanctions, the right thing to do,
the international price went up.
The rest of the world were then looking to get supply from other parts of the world.
The international price went up, and drilling for gas in North Sea wouldn't change that. They would just sell it at the higher price on the international market and probably export most of it. So why is the government pretending that it's suddenly going to help Britain?
Well, of course it will help Britain, because those taxes will be remitted to the UK.
So it's just about tax.
Nothing comes back to the UK when we import LNG gas from Australia, which is exactly what we did last August. Now, to me, that's not
a very important point you've just made. The only benefit to Britain is to the exchequer, isn't it, from selling this oil and gas. And the truth is that even on that we lose because of the subsidies that we give to these companies to actually drill in the first place, which is billions.
Let me give you the full suite of benefits. Number one, there's investment. Number two, there's jobs. Number three, there is tax revenues, which are very useful. And number four, it assists our balance of payments problem this country has always had. To me, substituting domestic supply out of the North Sea basin has got to be better all round than importing it from Australia, importing it in vast quantities from Qatar, and even importing it from Norway. Norway are not having these arguments. All of that. They are. And why are Norway going, even further and faster?
What about today stops us doing that in the future? We'll still be buying on the international market. We have no claim to buy North Sea oil and gas. We'll just be buying it the same way we do now, probably from Australia and Qatar.
Of course we will. I mean, Tristan, you ought to be having the same sort of discussion with South Africa about gold. Gold is an international commodity, but nobody's suggesting that South Africa shouldn't be mining it. We are being blessed in this country with a good supply of oil and gas. To me, it just makes every common sense to source that domestically, because even the Climate Change Committee, they will tell you that gas will be part of our energy mix up to 2050 and beyond.
But they also say if you want to lower prices for people,
all sorts of reasons,
that the way to lower prices is to invest in renewables, not in oil and gas. Well, so if you really want to make life better and take the hassle, as Rishi Sunak calls it, out of people's lives, you should be investing more in renewables, not in oil and gas.
I mean, I'm not fixated on any particular energy supply. I want a supply that is regular, that is reliable, and is at the cheapest cost. Now, you ought to perhaps have a little dig into some of the renewable companies' balance sheets and accounts. This claim of cheap energy really doesn't hold up. The only reason that it can really go to market is because it has an enormous amount of subsidies. That can't continue forever. And nobody has solved as yet the problem of storing that energy.
Well, you're just throwing out
batteries are one solution, and if you think the environmental footprint of batteries is low, then I think you ought to think again. We are going to be using gas as the turn-off and on-able balancing supply to keep electricity flowing for some time to come.
Do you feel?
And to me, sourcing that out in the North Sea Basin has to be more sensible than importing it from Australia, surely.
You must be feeling that you're winning the argument in the Conservative Party tonight. You know, Rishi Sunak is moving your way, you know, for the net zero scrutiny group. And I just wonder whether this feels a bit like the beginning of Brexit to you.
No, this is a campaign I've been running for some time and formalised it properly last year into the Net Zero Scrutiny Group. I always thought one day that common sense would prevail on this, where, you know, those sort of ridiculous things like importing wood pellets that have been forested from virgin forests in North America, pelletized, dried, put on a ship across the Atlantic, a diesel ship, and then burned in the UK, and we call that net zero. They're the type of ridiculous things that I've been highlighting, and I think what we're seeing today is the start of some common sense. I'm all in favour of that, and I hope we see more of it. We can have the argument about 2030 banning cars next.
Yeah, we will next time. Craig McKinley, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, joining me now from Bristol is the Shadow Leader of the Commons, Fangham Debonair. Now, Labour's policy's all over the place as well on this now, isn't it? Because Rachel Reeves is cutting the amount of money that you're going to spend on your big green initiative, and Keir Starmer apparently hates tree huggers.
Well, no, Labour's policy isn't all over the place. We are completely focused on our missions, one of which is to get to net zero energy, to make Great Britain a superpower in clean green energy by 2030. That is ambitious and bold.
Yeah, but you don't have a plan for how.
We do, actually, and we're going to do this by reforming where we have a planning system which is holding up those grid connections and that investment, where we already have capital and technical expertise, but unfortunately decisions take years to go through.
Sorry, where is the plan? I've never seen a detailed plan on how you're going to get all the carbon out of electricity by 2030. Hasn't been published yet.
Yeah, we are going to double onshore wind compared to the Tories' ban on onshore wind, which has cost customers £180 per household in the last year alone. We are going to triple solar, and we are going to quadruple offshore wind. We are going to be investing in getting the technologies of tidal and wave and hydrogen over the line, because they also have a massive contribution to make, particularly in an island nation where tidal and wave are such untapped sources of power that we could be world leaders in. That's good for jobs, it's good for bills, it's good for energy security, and it's good for climate action. And compare that with the Tories' announcement today, which is on the wrong side of history, as even Tory MPs themselves are saying.
But what is your answer to Rishi Sunak's basic point, which was that even in 2050, we will still rely on oil and gas? So why not extract it from a British supplier in the North Sea?
Well, you said it yourself in your interview just then with Craig McKinley, that actually the price of oil and gas is set by the international market. So that makes absolutely no difference to bills. And it's really important that we see this as an opportunity for economic growth and for spreading wealth across the country. If we invest in renewable energy, if we invest in new nuclear, tidal and wave, we will actually not just get us over the line on climate action and rapidly, we will also be creating fantastic jobs around the country and spreading the wealth throughout this country, which so badly needs it.
But you are clearly worried, aren't you? Which is why Rachel Reeves is backtracking on Ed Miliband's original pledge about the amount of money you'll be spending. About the amount of money you'll be spending.
Not backtracking. Our ambition is to spend £28 billion per year in the first,
But you slowed it down.
Of the first Parliament because of the damage that the Tory government has done to the economy. It would be irresponsible of us not to take into account the existing damage that the Tories have done to the economy and the potential for them to do still further damage, in part because of announcements like this, which the Office for Budget Responsibility has said will only lead to increasing debt and inflation.
So is Tony Blair wrong? Tony Blair's been warning, hasn't he, about going too hard and too fast on this for people, especially in a cost of living crisis. Is he wrong?
We have to see tackling the cost of living crisis and tackling climate change as things that go hand in hand, as indeed they do. Our new industrial revolution will be on renewable energy if we have a government under Keir Starmer that shows that sort of leadership. Antonio Guterres said this week, the head of the UN, that there is a strong call, a vital call for leadership because the air we breathe is becoming unbreathable. The heat is unbearable, as he said. Now, the only way to show real leadership is to give direction to businesses that want to invest in renewables, to households that are struggling with high bills, and to people who need those good jobs. And only Labour is going to provide that under Keir Starmer.
So is it true then that Keir Starmer, after a presentation by Ed Miliband, said he hates tree huggers?
He did not say he hates tree huggers.
What did he
I
say
was
then?
in that meeting. What's more,
what did he say?
Most, what we're actually going to do.
What did he say? If he didn't say I hate tree huggers, what did he say?
He didn't say I hated them, and I can't remember the exact wording, but he definitely didn't say he hated them. But that's the most important thing. The most important thing is that we get to climate action. We have leadership on climate action, and Keir Starmer has pledged that is going to be a fundamental part of our missions in a Labour government. That's what really counts. And all we're seeing today from the Tories is weak leadership, poor policy, and a total failure to grasp which side of history he needs to be on. The world is burning. Everybody knows that. We've had floods. We've had the 27 hottest days on record in the last month. There is no other course of action other than to take climate action. And yet Rishi Sunak seems to think it's okay to gamble with our planet's future and to gamble with the fact that economic prosperity by being a global leader would be the way to go.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.